Hello and welcome again to the Rider Review. This is Eric here at Rider, and I hope you all had a great Halloween. But as usual, it's business as always. This week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1990 movie titled The Sheltering Sky. Now, The Sheltering Sky is a drama which runs for 2 hours and 18 minutes long. It is directed by Bernardo Bertolucci. It is produced by Jeremy Thomas. The script was done by Bernardo Bertolucci and Mark Pepolo, based on a novel by Paul Bowles, who also has a cameo appearance. Did I say Bowles? I meant Bowles. The score was done by Ryuichi Sakamoto. The cinematography was done by Vittorio Storaro, and the editing was done by Gabriella Cristiani. The stars of the movie are Debra Winger, John Malkovich, Campbell Scott, Jill Bennett, Timothy Spall, and Eric Vuan. Now the synopsis goes a little something like this. Set in 1947, three New Yorkers, a artist couple named Port and Kit Moresby, played by John Malkovich and Debra Winger, along with their companion, George Tunner, played by Campbell Scott, visit the city of Tangier in Morocco, which leads them to the Sahara Desert. Tunner wants to leave within a week or two, while the Moresbys want to extend their stay for at least a year or two. They are acquainted by a mother-son duo, the Lyles, Mrs. Lyle, played by the late Jill Bennett, who's a travel journalist, and her son, Eric, played by Timothy Spall. Port invites Kit to explore the city, but she rebuffs and chooses to stay distant from him in the romantic department. In the city, Port meets up with a prostitute, and they have sex as the hooker tries to steal his wallet. Port leaves, which kind of leads them in on a chase. Tunner takes Kit shopping, not to let Tunner know that Port was out all night. She removes the covers to make it look like he slept there. Before Kit and Tunner leave, Port finds that he assumes that Kit has been having an affair with Tunner. Port and Kit are invited to the Lyles to ride in their car, but fear they have no room for Tunner. Port goes with the Lyles while Kit and Tunner go by train. The next morning, a drunken Tunner winds up in Kit's room as they had an unintentional rendezvous. Port asks Eric to provide Tunner a trip to Masad, that Port and Kit will meet him later. Eric agrees while confiscating Port's passport. Port agrees to go with Kit to Al Gaia as a way to possibly ditch Tunner. When suddenly Port eventually ends up becoming ill with typhoid and dies, leaving Kit alone in the deep Sahara. Kit's alone in the desert and is eventually rescued by a caravan led by a guy named Belkacem, played by Eric Vuan. He takes her to his place and has an affair, and tries to attempt to have an affair only to be caught by his wives. Kit becomes disoriented, hospitalized, and is transported back to Tangier, where Tunner is waiting for her. Kit flees into the city before Tunner could find her. Now here's what I thought about this movie. Sure, it's based on a novel by Paul Bowles. The Sheltering Sky is the story of, attempting to rekindle one's marriage. And definitely it's one of the greatest pieces of 20th century literature. When I rented this movie, I was even more flabbergasted when I saw that the DVD cover sleeve was featured well, it's said that it was directed by well-known Italian director Bernardo Bertolucci. I mean, I was just like, oh my God, Bertolucci directed it. I've seen a ton of his movies in the past, so I was assuming, I was left under the radar that this is gonna be something really special. The desert settings were the perfect locality for the film of this caliber, which probably even rivals Lawrence of Arabia or other cinematic classics like The English Patient. Even though Bertolucci and cinematographer Vittorio Storaro have physically made this movie a visual eye candy, there are still sadly a lot of traits that have an equally proportionate share of hits and misfortunate misses. It hurts me to say this, but the biggest flaws lie in the balance of the two leading stars, John Malkovich and Debra Winger, that play the roles of Port and Kit Moresby, a duo of self-absorbed, wealthy New Yorkers who travel to Tangier, Morocco, to spruce up some adventure to fix up their progressively crumbling marriage. Port and Kit pompously refer to themselves as travelers rather than tourists, towards their somewhat mutual friend George Tunner, played by Campbell Scott, who has a subtle attraction towards Kit. The triad brings an unnecessary amount of luggage, and that it becomes clear that style does outweigh substance, as the trifecta just wander about without any kind of purpose other than the fact that they're just raking in their wealth. There's no real specific reason why they chose Africa as their destination to help rekindle their marriage. The only thing I get out of it is that, hey, they're wealthy, they're multi-millionaires, and all they're doing is just milking in their wealth. That's the only impression I get. The Moresbys are probably caricatures that spell out F. Scott Fitzgerald. They're in their 30s, they're flamboyant, condescending, and have no cares for any kind of moral decency. It's obvious that this was a poor casting choice for Malkovich as the cultivated intellectual, trying to gather his ideas in a setting that doesn't quite comprehend, to an atmosphere where every foundation of him is quickly crumbling before his eyes, and that also includes his progressive physical health. Malkovich has none of the physical characteristics described in Bowles' novel, let alone the immaculate mannerisms portrayed there either. His light, monotone voice and his use for throwaways are opposed to the well-polished dialogue from Bowles' novel. Malkovich, hey, I gotta hand it to him, he is great at portraying somewhat macabre characters and brings that level with him to a lot of his performances. But Port is not at all like that. Sure, he's self-righteous and he's not exactly come across as being sympathetic, but he's not in any way, shape, or form diabolical. Debra Winger as Kit, she fares off a little bit better than Malkovich, and even though her narrative is the focal point of the story, she also seems to be somewhat physically wrong for the part. Where was Meryl Streep at the time? I think she would have been the more idealistic person to play the role of Kit Moresby. In Bowles' novel, it called for a fair, vulnerable, fragile woman in the opening scenes of her book. Winger seems to play off Kit as somewhat of a bold, strong-willed character, and her efforts to play it calculating seems at times quite contrived and borderline ridiculous, complete with her raspy laugh and her ample limbs. She seems too independent-minded, which is contrary to the character of Kit from the novel. And her Midwestern ways are opposite and seems to be out of place to the upper-class traits that Kit portrays in the book. Sure, at first she looks authentic to the characters in the book, with the costumings, and she does look quite stunning in the period piece costumes. But once she and Port wander aimlessly in the desert, her physical and mental demeanor are more Debra Winger than Kit Moresby, as opposed to the other way around. On the plus side, the supporting characters like Campbell Scott, Timothy Spall, and Jill Bennett, God rest her soul, are actually quite convincing in their respective roles, and at times they seem to upstage the leads in their scenes. The score by Ryuichi Sakamoto is quite thrilling, but at the same time it can be very jarring. The dialogue can be overwhelming, and their motives at times, this regards to the characters in the story, are actually at times very blank. The author, Paul Bowles, who plays a blind man at a bar, provides the narration, but the story of his journey feels more inferior to exterior, and the translation of what he's talking about is actually not quite decipherable. It's very, very complex. This is not a spoon-feeding movie. So unless you have a short attention span, or unless you want, if you want movies in the quick fast lane, well, you're not going to get it here. And that stands for a lot of Bertolucci movies. All his movies seem to have a very slow pace, and here there's no exception. So to put it in a nutshell, it's better to just read the novel before getting into the book, so you'll get a better comparison to the differences between the novel and the visually satisfying but poorly executed adaptation. If I was to give this a scale out of 10, I think I would only have to give this one a 6. Because the flaws are quite obvious. I didn't really care too much for the leading characters, because they just didn't seem to match the character traits from the novel. And in addition to that, I think it also may have took too long. I mean, the hours of this movie is 2 hours and 18 minutes long. I think it would have been better if it was just an hour and 45 minutes. Of course, the high points come in the form of the cinematography. I mean, the visual settings is quite impressive, and I think that's like the best thing about this movie. And I would have to give a hats off to the cinematographer Vittorio Storaro for providing this. Bernardo Bertolucci also gets some credit for, adapting a very complex movie, but I don't think it should have ever really been released. And don't just take my words for it. Even the author himself, Paul Bowles, once said that this movie should have never been made into a film, and even he had uttered disdain for this movie. So I'm not just saying it just to hear myself. He said it himself, Mr. Bowles. And even though I won't go far as to saying that, do I recommend this movie? Yes, I do. Would I see it again many more times? Probably not. Well, I guess this ends my writer review for this week. Thank you so much. Remember, please subscribe to my channel, and be kind, be courteous if you're going to write back. And I'll be back again with another review. Till next time, this is Eric Writer saying, keep watching those movies. Goodbye.